Hi everyone, it's Amy here and welcome to video number 7 in our Back to School Ready series. So in today's video we're going to be talking about two separate topics. The first one is new school etiquette. So you've been given a job at a different school than you've been working at before, or you're a new grad about to enter your first school. And we're going to be talking about some of the do's and don'ts of going to a new school. We're also going to be talking about parents, which kind of goes hand in hand with going to a new school. Now, parents are a big category and we're definitely not going to be talking about everything parents today. We're just going to be focusing on those first couple of interactions that you have with parents and how to get off on a good foot in your first week. So let's get started with new school etiquette. First of all, you really need to work out your school culture. So there are lots of different school cultures that you could have. You could have one where everybody's fresh and energized and very friendly and very welcoming of you. You could have a school culture where they don't like change. Maybe they're an older staff, they've been there for a long time, they like things the way it is and they don't like to change. You could be entering a school culture where you got the job over somebody else that they knew that didn't. That's going to be a really hostile working environment. We're going to talk about that a bit today. But basically you need to work out what kind of school culture you are in so then you can act accordingly, and we'll definitely highlight some of the things as we go on about do's and don'ts in different cultures in your school. The best way to work out what kind of culture you have is first of all watching. When you get there, have a look at how people are interacting. Have a look at the kind of like the buzz or lack of buzz on the first day of school, like when people are getting their coffees in the morning, when they're all sitting down getting ready to listen to the principal tell them what they're going to do on the first day of school. Just see how people are interacting with each other. Are they all warm and friendly? Is there kind of like isolating groups where people aren't mingling with each other? Or are people talking over the top of the principal while he's talking because they don't care about what he's saying? Just try and suss it out, watch and listen. And of course, as you start to meet people and talk to people, just kind of, start to ask them like, oh, what's it like working here? Or what can you tell me about the culture or the atmosphere at this school? And what they say and how they say it is obviously going to tell you a lot as well. That leads us on to the next one, which is definitely meet people. Definitely try and introduce yourself. If they're not coming over to you and introducing themselves to you, go to them, say, hi, I'm a new teacher here, get their name out, get your name out, try and get their name out, and just be really, really friendly with everybody. And then what we really want to do when we get to a new school, even if you're a seasoned teacher, is you want to find like a mentor or a peer that can help you at that school. Now, of course, if you're a new graduate, you can definitely ask your principal for recommendations, or some schools will even set you up with a mentor. They'll match you up with somebody and say, okay, this is the person you can go to. This person's going to help you with everything. Suss out somebody who's really friendly, really welcoming, somebody that you feel comfortable with, and somebody who seems organized and has everything together. Because obviously you want to find somebody who's got time to give. You don't want to be going to somebody who makes you feel guilty every time you go there because they always look like they're rushing around doing things. Find somebody who is going to be able to make time for you where you feel okay going and talking to them. And again, you can ask your admin or your principal for a recommendation of somebody in the school if you're not kind of finding somebody in the first couple of days. The next thing you need to do is learn the unwritten rules of the school. So of course, in a lot of schools, you're going to be given a staff handbook, which is going to tell you all the written rules, but there are so many unwritten rules in a school that are really going to shape how you fit in at that school. For example, and I'm sure you've had one of these schools on your pracs in university before, but there are schools where you will go into the staff room and people have their designated spots, and there are people who are going to get very, very upset if you sit in a certain person's spot. So definitely be sussing out those unwritten rules. When you enter a staff room, for example, if you're worried about whether they're going to be that type of school, just ask before you sit. Just go and sit next to somebody and say, look, is it alright if I sit here? This isn't anybody's spot, is it? You can make a joke out of it. And if they say, oh yeah, that's where so-and-so sits, then you know, okay, gotta go somewhere else. Another one, and this one can be really, really simple, but it can make or break your first day, is parking. Ask your principal if there's designated parking, especially if there's like numbers or something written. That usually means that there's going to be particular parking for particular people. So ask your principal where is okay to park. Or just, again, make a bit of a joke out of it. Say, hey, on the first day of school, like, is it okay if I park anywhere? Or is there particular spots? Now, of course, I usually go to school and I park in a particular spot most days because it's just the one that's available. It's just the one that I happen to pull into most of the time. That's not one that I have ownership over in any sort of way, and I'm not going to get upset if somebody parks there. But there are definitely some teachers in some schools who are very regimented, like this is that person's parking spot, don't park there. So try and suss that out as quickly as you can. There may be other little things like that, and again, this is great where your mentor can come in and just say to them like, hey, is there anything that I really need to know about school? Is anybody touchy about anything? Like, is there something that's going to offend somebody if I do? Then just, be cautious with your actions and what you do. Don't try and jump into everything or anything too quickly. So when you go to a new school, you want to be involved. And like if there's an opportunity to work on a committee, then put your hand up and go, yeah, I want to get involved. I want to be on that committee. But don't be stepping on toes too quickly. Don't be trying to put initiatives in too quickly. So for example, don't go to the school and go, oh, my last school had this amazing behavior management program. I could implement it here. Let's implement it here. This is how we're going to do it. That's going to get you in trouble. That's going to be diving in too quickly. But join in the behaviour committee and seeing what kind of procedures are in the school already, and then as you've been there for a couple of weeks, starting to make suggestions if you see things, because obviously you're coming from a different school, you're bringing in new ideas or you're coming in from university where you may have ideas from that. You want to bring those to the school, especially if you're on a fixed term contract and you're looking to get employed for the next year, but you just don't want to do all that stuff too quickly, and definitely not in the first week. So just kind of tread carefully. There are a couple of people in the school that you definitely want to get friends with straight away, and they can be a little bit difficult to befriend because they're not always going to be the teacher, they're not always going to be the people that you see around the school constantly or in the staff room at recess or lunch. And the first person that you want to really befriend is the office person. Now I'm calling them office person, which probably isn't the best title for them, but I think it differs from school to school and state to state. So we're talking about that person who sits up in the office and greets people when they come in, does a lot of the paperwork, sends out a lot of the newsletter and emails. That person is a great friend to have in a school. Really, really helpful. They are always so knowledgeable about everything that's going on, and they can make your life so much easier if you befriend them. So just make sure you go up and introduce yourself to the office people. You know, say hi, I'm a new teacher, and just pop in every now and again and say hello. The other person is if you have a library officer, make sure you befriend them, especially if they're the ones that look after all the teacher resources. That's like a magical power in most schools, and again, they can really make your life a lot easier. And some of those people can, in some schools, make your life a living hell if you don't treat them nice. So make sure you go and introduce yourself to them. And people like the gardener, you might see that person, popping around the school in places, but you may not have a chance to actually stop and talk to them unless you actively go and do that. The next thing is, don't hide in your classroom. Especially if you're a new graduate and this is like your first week ever in a school, the tendency is to want to stay in your classroom and get work done because you're like, oh, I've got to prep for that lesson. Oh, then I've got to prep for this lesson. And it can feel overwhelming, like you have to be there in your classroom doing it, but you don't. Make a time, whether it's locking in recess or it's locking in half of lunch, go up to the staff room because you need to make friends and you need to learn, or not learn, but you need to have a support group at a school, and part of that is just being able to talk to other teachers. Don't hide away in your classroom. It's not seen as a good thing. It's not a reputation you want to have, so make the time for it. At my school, I always try to get up to the staff room at recess time whenever I can. There's the occasional time when I don't, but on average, I'm up there most times during recess time. So work out when you can make that work. Go to the staff room, say hi to people, try and introduce yourself to different people, try not to get slotted into one group, move around, talk to different people, and find your tribe, find the people that you want to speak to. The thing you want to do is try and learn all the routines of your school, which can be really tricky because a lot of other teachers, when they've been at a school for a while, don't actually remember what those things are. They just do them all naturally and they just kind of expect everybody else will know them, and they can be very different from your previous school. So for example, when I went to my school, the duty roster said duty on the bank, and I was like, what the heck is the bank? Where is the bank? It wasn't on the school map. It was just a word that people had used to describe a particular area of our school. So I had to go up to the deputies and say, look, I've got duty here at the bank and I have no idea where that is. So they had to describe it to me, and eventually I was like, oh, obvious. Okay, well, that's the bank. I get that now. But at first, it wasn't obvious to me, and it wasn't something they really thought of. They weren't used to having new teachers at their school. The two other people that got employed at the same time as me had done relief work there, so they already knew all this stuff. As I've said before, you may get a staff handbook Did I say that before? I can't remember if I mentioned that before. You may get a staff handbook which may tell you a lot of the routines, but a lot of the simpler things may not be in there. So just make sure that if you're coming up to an event or a certain thing that's happening, just ask the teacher next door or your mentor teacher, like, can you just tell me the stuff that happens around this? Another example in my first school that I went to was they had done this thing for a really long time called a lapathon, where the kids run laps to raise money for the school. Now, obviously that sounds, really simple, but there was so many little pieces to it, and there was no notes put out about how to do any of it because the staff had done it for so long, they just knew all the pieces of it. So don't be afraid to go up to somebody and say, look, can you explain this to me, please? Because what might not be, the things that are around it that may be obvious to them may not be obvious for you. Next, you want to make sure that you're checking if there are any newsletters or memos, or just kind of like how communication is done within the school. I know of one school where a new teacher came along and she was not put on the special email list for a particular newsletter, and it was weeks before she even figured out that there was all these newsletters going through to these people on this list. She wasn't on it, she wasn't getting all that information, and then she was getting in trouble for not knowing about any of this stuff. So just ask, how's communication done at this school? Is something put in your pigeonhole? Is there an email that comes out? And then check for that email, and if you don't get it, go and see your admin and say, look, I'm not getting this email, because it does happen. And again, you shouldn't feel bad about asking for all this stuff, because you are new to the school and they will expect you to have a learning curve on it. What I have done up for you guys today is a list of all the things that I think you might like to think about when you're at a new school and things to ask. Some of the stuff on this list you can probably check through straight away because you might have a staff handbook that goes through a lot of it, or maybe your principal or admin sat down with you for an induction and gone through a lot of this stuff already. But if some of the stuff on this list you can't tick off and you don't know about, then it kind of just triggers in your head to maybe go and ask somebody about it. I'll go through the list with you quickly. That's why I've got my laptop here today, so that I can have all these things up, because it is quite a long list. Again, some of these things won't apply to you, or you may already know. So the first one is policies, things like your dress code policy at your school, written documents that the school has done up that you might need to know about. Another one would be your homework policy. The next one is any plans that the school have done that tell you what you should be doing in your classroom. So is there a particular program that you have to use for spelling or maths? In my school they're called operational plans. I'm not sure what they're called in other states. You also want to find out what's the routine with your canteen. So my canteen is only open 3 days a week, and the kids have to go there in the morning to order their food, and then at lunchtime they have an area where they congregate to pick up their meals. So definitely find out what the routine is, because it can vary so much between schools. You want to find out about any veranda or walkway policies. For example, I know a school that's a 2-story building and sound really echoes and travels really well. So when they're moving around in lines in that school, they have to be absolute silent. There is no whispering tolerated at that school. So just find out if there's any rules like that. Some schools might have a walkway where you go one way on one side and the other way on the other side, and you don't kind of spread out across the veranda. Ask about drink fountains. When can they be used? Can you send kids during the middle of the day to them? What's the sort of policy with that? And of course that goes hand in hand with the toilets. Is there a policy where you have to send 2 kids at one time? Do you need to be recording when people are going out? Do you have to have some sort of out of class system or note? You want to know about teacher dress code as well. I know at the first school that I was at, it was in a rural town that could get quite hot, so we were allowed to wear sleeveless dresses or shirts because of the climate. That was appropriate. But I've also been in another school where it wasn't appropriate to show off your shoulders. So just kind of find out whether there's a written policy or whether you might need to speak to your admin members about any little nuanced things. Backstrap on shoes are another thing. Some schools will not let you wear sandals or thongs that don't have some sort of restraint at the back. And then of course there are other schools that require enclosed toe shoes. So definitely check out things like that. You want to know about arrivals and dismissals. So how are the students coming into the school? Are you allowed to let them into your classroom early? Is there a place where you might have to go and pick them up in the morning? Just find out about those sort of things. And dismissals in the afternoon. Are you just allowed to let your kids go out? Do the parents have to come in and collect them? Do you have to know how the students are getting home? That goes hand in hand obviously with bell times, so knowing when the kids are going out and knowing the signals for it as well. So is it a bell that goes, or is it just you've got to watch your watch and then you let them go? What do you do about attendance? Is there a certain time of the day that attendance must be in by? Is it handwritten? Or not handwritten, is it hand done, or is it digital? You also want to find out about late students. So do students come straight to the class and then you have to record them as late? Should they be bringing in a late note? The photocopier, is there an allowance of how much you can photocopy? Is there a colour photocopier in the school? And also that goes hand to hand with printers as well. A lot of schools I know are now merging their printers and their photocopiers together, so I put those ones together. You want to find out about teacher resources. Where are they located? Where are the teacher books? Where are the maths resources, the science, the technologies? Is there a surplus of supplies that you can go and access for your room? Which also goes hand in hand with budgets. Is there a budget you can spend? How long do you have to spend it? Is it a collaborative budget with everybody in your year level and you will have to get together to work out how you're going to spend it? You also need to think about asking before decorating the room if you're thinking of drilling any holes in the wall or putting up things on the roof or in a particular area. You might just want to ask first. For example, we got our doors painted at the end of last year and we're now no longer allowed to put up anything on our door. So just checking before you do things like that. Ask about drink bottles and snacks in the classroom. So I do crunch and sip in my room so the kids can have their drink bottle near their desk and a snack when they want to eat. Some schools aren't going to let you do that, so ask about that. You want to ask about duty. So what are the requirements on duty? So we have to, at our school, wear a bright high-vis vest, and we have a little bag that we have to carry that has things like band-aids in it and other little things. You want to know about any playground rules. Again, this can be another one that's unwritten. So for example, when I first went to my school, I had no idea whether kids were allowed to climb trees or not. It wasn't written anywhere, so that's something you might want to find out and ask. Check your out of bounds areas to make sure the kids aren't going in those, and what kind of activities the kids can be doing at lunchtime and recess. You also want to find out about collaboration with other staff. Is it something you're given time for? Like, is there a planning session each week where you guys all get together at a particular time? Or what is the expectation of how much you collaborate with other teachers? You might also want to find out about accessing your classroom out of hours. So if you want to go in there on the weekend and do some extra work, or if you want to get there early in the morning. I knew a teacher once who used to beat the cleaners to her school. So finding out how you can get into the school, whether you're allowed to, any security codes, those sorts of things. You want to find out about timetables in the school. So is there a particular format that you have to use for your timetable? Do you need to submit it to your principal? And are there other timetables that you might need to fill out? For example, a computer lab timetable or a library timetable. Told you this list was long. You might want to check about computer logins, so getting a login so you can actually go onto the school system. They usually don't carry on from one school to another. You usually have to go and see your school register or an office person to get that set up. You also want to know straight away from day one what the routine is for calling in sick. Who do you call in? What time do you have to call in by? Is there an expectation for you to do relief notes? How much does your relief notes have to have, and how much do you have to have prepared in advance? You want to know about evacuation procedures and lockdown procedures, or where the information is stored or displayed for those when you need them. You want to find out about the behaviour management policy. I've listed this one as a separate one. I know I said policies up the top, but you also want to know more about behaviour management because there might be whole school reward systems or things that you need to get done, like merit certificates. You want to find out about assemblies or morning meetings or whatever your school calls them. Is there a roster for managing the assembly or putting on a performance? Is there certain things that happen at the assembly that you might need to know about? An interesting one for me was I had no idea going into my first assembly that we do a whole school song at the end. So everyone stands up, they've learnt it in music. It's usually like a pop song that's been around for a while, or it's quite an older song, and the kids sing it, and it was just such an amazing experience to go in there and not know about it, and everyone's standing up and I'm like, what is everybody doing? And then they all just started singing, and I think my first song that we ever did was Radioactive, so that was it was an amazing feeling to see that, but it would have been a little bit nice to know that that was going to happen. You also want to know about any meetings in terms of staff. So is there a certain day of the week that staff meetings are on? Sometimes those can be routine every year and people can just forget to tell you, oh yeah, we meet every Wednesday after school. So just checking when your meetings are going to be. Is there any students in the school that you need to know about? So any particular behaviour problems that maybe aren't in your class, but you might encounter out on playground duty, so ask about them. Forms of communication. How are you expected to communicate within the school? Do people like it if you send emails? Do they prefer things to pigeonhole? And also contacting parents. Is there a requirement that you need to ring a parent if a student's been away for 3 days? Are you allowed to send out emails to parents, or do they need to first be seen by your principal or line manager? Is there a letterhead you have to use for when you send letters out? Shared resources. So you might not even know about some of the resources that are already located in people's class that you can have access to. So maybe a particular teacher on your veranda has a resource that the whole veranda is meant to access, but you don't know about it until you ask. Also, ask about staff initiatives. So is there a morning tea roster that you might like to get your name on? Does your school do a lotto thing where everyone puts in money and somebody arranges that each week? Just ask if there's any little staff things that go on. And lastly, we have already touched on this one, but parking. Just find out if there's particular places you are and aren't allowed to park and what the kind of routine is with that. So, oh my gosh, that was a long list of things you need to check. But again, I don't think you would ever have the list that long. You would have the staff handbook probably that you can tick a lot of stuff off for, or there might be some policies floating around that you can get that answer a lot of those questions in one document. Okay, so let's get into part 2 of this video, which is all about interacting with parents. As I said at the beginning of this video, parents are a humongous category and we could talk for days about how to interact with them. But for today's video, I really want to just focus on those first few initial meetings with parents, so kind of covering the first week. And again, I'm going to take this mainly from the point of view of new graduates who haven't had any experience in a classroom before in terms of the first start of the year and dealing with parents for the first time. So my first advice is to be confident. In all of your dealings with the parent, come across as confident. Don't have any hesitation with any of your answers that you give them. Act like you know exactly what you're doing and you don't have any doubts about that. Because parents are coming in and they're giving you their little baby. You know, it's their world and they're trusting you with it, and they just want to know that their little child is in safe hands and is going to have the best for the year. So by you coming across as confident without hesitation, it's going to give them a lot of reassurance. The second thing is to be very welcoming to parents. So what I choose to do on the first day of school is when the child comes in, I introduce myself to them first. I say, "Hi, I'm Mrs. O'Grady, how are you today? What's your name?" And I have a little bit of an interaction with them. And then I address the parents and I go, "Hi, I'm Amy, how are you doing today?" And I feel like just changing it and telling them my first name as opposed to saying, "Hi, I'm Mrs. O'Grady," just kind of makes it a little bit more personable for them. And I don't know, I think it gets it off on a really nice foot. You might not choose to do that. You might like to address the whole family when they come in and say, "Hi, I'm Mrs. O'Grady," to everybody. And that's fine. Just whatever you do, be welcoming and be confident in your approach. Whenever you're dealing with parents, whatever questions they throw at you, always think about what's their motivation for asking this question. And usually it's coming from a place of love. They love their child. They want the best for their child. So if they're asking you a question about how something's done in a classroom, they're not asking it to try and degrade you at all or tell you how to do things. They just want the best for their child, and they're trying to make sure that the child's going to get that. So if you think of it that way, if you think of it as coming from a place of love, it can make it easier to understand them and then deal with them, because you're trying to see where they're coming from with their ideas and trying to understand them a little bit better. Have clear instructions on the first day of school, so when the parents come in, they can instantly know what they need to do to help their child. The last thing you want to do is have a whole heap of parents running up to you going, "What do I do this? What do I do that? What do I do with that?" You want that time to be for the kids. You want to be introducing yourself to them and making them feel comfortable before their parents have to go out of the room. So the more you can have clear instructions around the room for what the parents need to do to help their child, the better the classroom's going to flow, the happier the parents are going to be. First day of school is stressful for you, but it's also stressful for parents, especially if they have more than one kid and they're trying to float around to all these different classrooms, trying to drop their kid off, trying to make their child feel comfortable before leaving them, and then they've got all that hesitation in them about leaving their child. So what I like to do is usually have posters up around the classroom, usually on the front board and somewhere at the back, that says, "Okay, this is what you need to do." Also, I've started putting one on students' desks so it's even clearer, because once you get a whole heap of people in the room, you might think that you're handwritten notes up on the board are nice and clear and all parents are going to see them, but as soon as you've got a few parents in the room, they're going to start to get blocked. So by having one on the desk for students, it says very, very clearly, this is what you need to put in your big tray, this is what you need to put in your little tray if you have a desk tray, this is where this goes, please make sure these are labelled. Once you've done all of that, this is what you can do. If you're very clear with that, it's going to make the parents feel a lot more comfortable because they're going to know exactly what's going on. A little tip for that as well, what I've liked to do for the last 2 years is on the back of those instructions, I put a word search with all the kids' names in it. So as soon as they've done everything they have to, they can sit there and be doing a little word search and finding out who's in their classroom, because that's always a question that they have. The next thing is be enthusiastic, okay? Even if you don't have any experiences, it's the first time you've been in your classroom, you can set a parent's mind at ease just by being enthusiastic and passionate about what you're doing. Be approachable, so don't kind of hide off in the corner or make yourself always look like you're busy. Be welcoming, be moving around the classroom, making eye contact with people so that parents feel like they can come up to you. And as the parents leave, say hi, come and see me if you need anything, or I like to do a welcome note on the first day for the parents, which always has at the bottom, if you would like to meet with me at any time, please just let me know, we can set up a meeting, or here are the exact times that I'm available for a meeting, like afternoons are best or something like that, so that they know exactly how they can approach you. Also in that letter, I love to put the timetable if it's worked out by then. Obviously, if you know that the timetable is going to change because there's different things happening in the school, you wouldn't put out the timetable on the first day, you'd wait a few days, but giving them a timetable makes them feel even more relaxed about everything and knowing what's going on. They can put it up on their fridge so they know when their child needs to wear special sports gear or bring a certain musical instrument, or try and remind their child to bring in a library book. My last tip is to smile. There is nothing more approachable than just smiling. There's nothing more relaxing than seeing somebody smiling. So no matter how nervous you are, try and work a smile on your face. And it's actually really good for you too, because when we smile, it releases certain hormones in our body and endorphins that actually make us feel happier. So definitely do that. The last thing that I want to finish on today is if you are a new grad or you're starting in a new school and you look fairly young, you're probably going to get the question of how long have you been a teacher? There's always at least one parent that seems to ask it. I think every time I started at a new school, I definitely got it. And any time that I get a new parent to the school, because I've been at my school now for 8 years, I think it is, 8 or 9 years, because of that, when a new parent starts at the school, they don't know me, they don't know that I've been around for that long, so they will tend to ask me as well, while the rest of the parents kind of go, oh, well, I've seen her around the school for a long time, so I know she's been teaching for a while. But when they ask it, you might be a bit nervous to tell them your answer because you might not have taught before. So what I recommend in that situation is, obviously you have to be honest, you have to tell them you're a new grad, but add something else to it and say it with confidence and enthusiasm. So this is my first year, but I'm so passionate about being a teacher. I'm so enthusiastic. I've got so many ideas for what we're going to do this year. It's going to be an amazing year. So just showing enthusiasm and being passionate about your job just goes a long way. So I hope this video has been useful for you guys, and I will see you in tomorrow's video. Bye!